Support for WUWM podcasts comes from University School of Milwaukee, fulfilling a values-based mission of developing learners, fostering leaders, and preparing citizens for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. More information at usm.org/mission.
This is Capital Notes from Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Maayan Silver, speaking with J.R. Ross. He's editor of WizPolitics.com. Hi, J.R. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Okay, so data centers are front and center in the news these days in Wisconsin and around the country. Tech companies are building these facilities to power AI and cloud computing. They supply energy to power things like servers for processing, storing data, and cooling systems to prevent overheating. Communities are pushing back because the facilities use a lot of energy and water resources. I was just wondering, how are Wisconsin lawmakers approaching this?
Well, for the most part, we just saw a new announcement last week. I think $1 billion project in Beaver Dam, if I remember correctly. They're mostly kind of celebrating these things as big opportunities for Wisconsin, but there are a couple of kind of things we're watching. Like for one, with the water issue, these data centers are trying to argue or make the point of like these, I think it's called closed loop systems. They're recycling the water. Okay, they need to kind of better promote those things. Also, there are concerns about energy. They are arguing, these companies on these data centers, that once they build new capacity, utilities to power these things, they'll pick up the tab, that the new generation plants, the new power lines, they're not going to be borne by ratepayers. Well, people aren't convinced. And you add, like, there's just the water and power, two examples, right? But you add it up, and that's why you have the Marquette poll a couple weeks ago that shows majority of Republicans, independents, and Democrats think that the costs outweigh the benefits of these coming centers. So if you are a data center proponent, it's kind of incumbent upon you to do a better PR job and convince people that, yeah, they can feel okay about these things, because there's some real concerns. You're seeing some pushback. We're seeing some legislation move in the Capitol that would assist in the development of these facilities because it's called a tax incremental finance district. Essentially, communities can create an area where they take new tax revenue from a development and plow it right back into infrastructure in that area rather than like having it benefit everybody in the area. We're seeing some bills that would increase the size of how much you could put into a TIF district, because some communities are already like at their max, but they're getting these big, $1 billion+ projects. They need more capacity. So far they're kind of on board in the Capitol, but yeah, there's some growing signs of concern, or at least kind of eyebrows raised, wanting some answers about what's going on.
So yeah, a key driver for this kind of like influx of data centers in Wisconsin is that, as you were just talking about with the TIF districts, it was in the 2023-2025 state budget. It created a sales and use tax exemption for data center construction costs as well. And that made Wisconsin a more competitive location with other states. And then there's also proximity to the Great Lakes. Is there anything else that you're seeing about why this is hitting Wisconsin?
Well, for example, you look at what happened with Microsoft and kind of the Racine County area. I mean, Foxconn obviously did not produce what it says it's going to produce almost 10 years ago now, and then Governor Scott Walker was promoting it, right? But it did lead to this giant development that cleared the way, created a foundation for it. So there's some factors like that, where a place like in Western Racine County, they had the land already cleared, the infrastructure there, it made sense to build it there, So, but yeah, for the most part, there are a number of factors that are making us attractive, and that tax credit is definitely one of them.
And you mentioned the Marquette poll where where they were talking to registered voters and seeing where people are falling on this issue. Are lawmakers following party lines? For instance, are Republicans championing development while Democrats are looking at the environment and consumer protection, or are you seeing blurred lines there?
Blurred lines. I mean, Governor Evers has been a big champion of these things. Every time one comes up, he's promoting it. And an interesting thing that Charles Franklin said, the Marquette poll director, was he looked at the results with all three, Dems, Republicans, Independents, all kind of having concerns, and said it hasn't become a partisan issue yet. They're not getting partisan voters aren't yet getting their signals from their quote unquote team about where to be. It's more kind of they're on their own deciding, hey, I've got an issue here. So.
Interesting. And are you seeing at this point any buyer's remorse for those state budget provisions that made data construction costs, gave them a tax exemption?
Not widespread, no, not so far.
Okay. And do you see that this issue would maybe bubble up and become, we're a ways away from the 2026 midterms, but do you see that this could be one of those driving issues?
The driving issue right now is affordability. If you're not talking about affordability in October of 2026, you're probably not talking about the right thing. Now, things can change between now and the fall, but all the signs, what we saw in New Jersey and Virginia elsewhere in early November, were that people are still concerned about costs. And so this might play into that discussion about costs if people have concerns that they're going to pay more because of data centers coming to Wisconsin.
This is Capital Notes. I'm Ayan Silver, speaking with J.R. Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com. Switching gears a little bit, President Donald Trump signed legislation last week to end the longest government shutdown in American history at 43 days. Small group of Democrats joined with Republicans to back a spending package. It didn't really address their main demand, which was extending healthcare tax credits. Were there any sort of surprises in how Wisconsin lawmakers voted?
No, down party lines. I mean, Mark Pocan and Gwen Moore in safe House seats. Tammy Baldwin, voted no, so no real big surprises. The question I kind of have is looking forward is Democrats were on like this sugar high after results in, Virginia, New Jersey, and elsewhere. This kind of like took the attention away from that and put it back on the intra-party squabbles they're having about, things like how do you approach a government shutdown? How do you approach the demand for these extended subsidies? What do you do when 8 senators break ranks and say, hey, it's time to end this thing? So there's some intra-party fighting right now. My question is, will it last? This funding bill goes through January, I believe. So do we have another shutdown fight come January? In talking to people this past week, my impression has been that by the time elections roll around in November of 26, it's probably going to be a forgotten thing. You probably won't depress the Democratic base unless you get in a cycle of repeated shutdowns, right? Like the bill that funded through January. What happens if in January pass a bill that only goes through April? And I'm just pulling months out of thin air, but just giving an illustration of, is this issue going to be resolved at some point that it kind of gets to rest, that the focus for Democrats goes back to their main nemesis, which is Donald Trump. He is an amazing motivator for the Democratic base, and we saw that in Virginia and New Jersey.
Gwen Moore said, Congresswoman from the Milwaukee area, said in a statement that she appreciates and respects the 8 Democratic senators who helped broker the deal, but that she has, quote, little confidence in the promise of a future vote on a still unknown proposal to extend ACA premium subsidies, referring to the Affordable Care Act there. Is there any movement potential for Democrats on that topic?
No, I mean, we saw that they got a promise of a vote in the Senate, but House GOP leaders have said they didn't promise anything. And that's why while Gwen Moore had nice words, at least respectable words for those 8 Democrats, Mark Pocan did not. He used a couple words I can't mention in this podcast or this interview to describe his feelings about what's going on with those 8. So, yeah, there's just some tensions there for Democrats right now they got to work through about this issue.
And SNAP benefits, or what's called food share in Wisconsin, was a big point of contention in this shutdown. Essentially, how it works is it's an EBT card called a Quest card that qualifying low-income folks can get to help them buy food. The Trump administration was in a legal battle with states over this aid. How did that shake out?
Oh, basically it's a lot of drama that in the end people are going to get the full benefits. There were court fights. The governor moved to provide full benefits in one swoop once the door was opened by a court. The Trump administration tried to claw that money back, so you guys did the wrong thing. There's more court proceedings, and then boom, the deal is signed into law to reopen the government. Those benefits are funded, and as far as I know from the Evers administration, they expect no real impacts for folks on the program beyond that. So it looks like everything's back to normal, for now at least, with SNAP.
Do you think in a way maybe it got food insecurity more front and center for a lot of people in terms of trying to help others?
Possibly. It was interesting. Republicans kept predicting that Democrats would fold all these different deadlines throughout the entire process of the negotiations. The No Kings protest, they'll fold after that. SNAP benefits, they'll fold after that. After the elections are over, they'll fold after that. Turns out it was the threat of possibly a plane falling out of the sky. I don't want to be flippant, mind you, at all about plane crashes, but the idea of these paring back of flight capacity in various places, the worries about overworked and not being paid air traffic controllers, one's calling in sick. You're going into November to Thanksgiving. That is not a great situation to have. And it looks like that pressure point finally was one of the things that moved Democrats, enough of them, to get the deal through both houses and on the president's desk.
And then another thing that happened recently is that 2 attorneys who allegedly designed a legal strategy to help President Donald Trump overturn his 2020 election loss, they're in the news. President Trump gave them a presidential pardon, among a lot of others. There's still a state investigation against them. What should we know here?
Well, I don't want Amy to take my legal advice because I'm not an attorney, but from what I know of the law and presidential powers, the president can't issue a pardon that undercuts state charges. They only apply to federal charges, right? So it looks like, on the surface, this is mostly a symbolic thing in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin case. So again, looks like. Maybe we will find out that there's something that I don't know because of my limited legal background, but looks like it's mostly symbolic. At the same time, Jeff Mandel is an attorney with Law 4, is a progressive law firm in Madison. They've been really involved in the false elector scheme quite a bit. They filed a civil suit against those involved. They filed complaints with the Office of Lawyer Regulation against Jim Krupas, one of the attorneys involved in the scheme. Andrew Hitt, former state GOP chair, who also was one of the electors. He argued that this is more than symbolic, that this is sending a message to people who support President Trump that if they interfere with the election next fall, he'll give them the get-out-of-jail-free card. Now, we're a long ways from that, but the argument's being made that there's something more than just symbolism here, that this is a call to arms, if you will, ahead of 2026. And I guess the only thing to say is we'll find out in the next 12 months whether he's true, right or not.
Definitely, we will. Thanks for the analysis, as always, JR, and thanks for joining me on Capital Notes.
Anytime.
That was J.R. Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com, speaking with me, WUWM's Maayan Silver. Listen for our segments every other Monday with an extended segment on Lake Effect, and check out the Capital Notes podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Sources and methods, the crown jewels of the intelligence community. Shorthand for how do we know what's real? Who told us? If you have those answers, you're on the inside, and NPR wants to bring you there. From the Pentagon to the State Department to spy agencies, listen to understand what's really happening and what it means for you. Sources and Methods, the new national security podcast from NPR.